It's that time of the year when the union budget takes center stage. This significant event becomes the focal point of discussions on news channels, online portals, and various other social media platforms. Now, the upcoming budget comes on the backdrop of a resilient Indian economy. However, amidst this resilience, there are notable challenges that demand our attention. Global geopolitical tensions are on the rise, and issues such as muted job creation, a somewhat subdued rural recovery, and weak export demand are prominent concerns that cannot be ignored. In this scenario, the government faces the task of balancing multiple priorities. Now, this becomes even more crucial considering it's an election year, as the big question arises: will the current government opt for populist measure or adhere to fiscal consolidation? Now, while we talk about this, what exactly is fiscal consolidation? What is an interim budget and how is it different from a full budget? How are the government finances looking this year? What can we expect from this interim budget? Let's uncover this in this video of Informed Investor. A union budget is essentially the central government's annual financial statement outlining the anticipated revenue and expenditure of the government for the upcoming financial year, spanning from April 1st, 2024 to March 31st, 2025. Now, in simple terms, a union budget is like a big financial plan that the central government makes every year. Think of it like your household budget, but on a much larger scale, giving importance to different sectors of the economy. Now, it decides how much money should go where based on what's most important for the country. Now, this can include supporting education, healthcare, infrastructure, and other sectors. Now, the responsibility of preparing and presenting this crucial document lies with the finance minister. However, it's not a one-person show. This process involves consultations with various entities, including the Ministry of Finance, different ministries, and the Niti Aayog. Now, the Finance Ministry engages in pre-budget meetings with a diverse group of stakeholders, ranging from state representatives and agriculturists to bankers, economists, and trade unions. Once all these inputs are considered, the Finance Minister, armed with hopefully a good understanding of the nation's needs, discusses the proposed budget with the Prime Minister for final confirmation. Now, the grand finale of this process is the presentation of the budget to the Parliament. The Finance Minister takes the stage, summarizing the key points of the budget and delving into the rationale behind each proposal. Now, the world of budget is not just about numbers, it also holds very interesting stories. Take, for instance, the very origin of the word budget. It has its roots in the French word budget, meaning a small bag or briefcase. Now, the connection to colonial history is quite evident. In 2019, the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman decided to break away from the colonial tradition, and instead of carrying the budget documents in a briefcase, she made a symbolic shift to using a baikata, a traditional red cloth in which the document is wrapped and brought to the Parliament. Now, this move was not just about changing the way the budget was presented, it was a statement signaling India's departure from its colonial past. Now, interestingly, with the rise of digital budgets, the significance of both the briefcase and the baikata may diminish over time. Now, India's first ever budget was presented on April 7, 1860 by Scottish economist James Wilson from the East India Company. It introduced income tax, which is a major source of revenue for the government even now. Now, if we delve into the political history surrounding the union budget, there's a noteworthy shift post-1991. Now, before this period, it was common for the Prime Minister to take on the role of the Finance Minister. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister, presented the budget in Parliament in 1958-59. Notably, Indira Gandhi became the first woman Prime Minister to present the budget on the floor of the House. Now, even Rajiv Gandhi, while serving as the Prime Minister, took on the role of the Finance Minister to present the budget. However, the dynamics changed after 1991, making a clear separation between the roles of the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. Now, these were some interesting, noteworthy stories about our past union budgets. Now, coming to the significance of the budget. Whenever a political party takes charge in India, they've got some big responsibilities towards our society and the economy. Now, India is like a colorful mix of different cultures, religions, and economy. So it's really important for the government to spend our resources smartly. This includes uplifting underprivileged sections of the society, ensuring financial inclusion, reducing regional disparities, strengthening our defense capabilities, providing quality education, and much more, while still having a tight control over their expenditures. Now, overall, the budget is an opportunity for the government to implement policies that can contribute to the all-round development of the country. Now, coming to the critical aspect of this video. Since it's an election year, the current government can only give us an interim budget, or what they call a vote on account budget, instead of the regular full budget. So what exactly does this mean? When it comes to interim budget, the government usually plays it safe. They don't go all out with major changes or new plans. They keep things steady, continuing with policies and initiatives that are already there. In the past, big policy announcements weren't usually made during this interim budget. The finance minister even said that there won't be any big shakeups or surprises in this interim budget. So they're keeping it low-key until the new government comes in and drops the full budget in July. So the complete budget will be presented by the new government in July 2024 after the Lok Sabha elections. Now let's dig into the details of how the government handles its money, both what's coming in and what's going out. Now we'll start with where the money is coming from. The revenue component of the government is usually divided into revenue receipts and capital receipts. So first up, we've got tax revenues, things like income tax, corporate tax, security transaction tax, and sometimes wealth tax and gift tax. There are also other indirect taxes mainly dominated by the GST, customs duty on certain imports, and excise duty on special products like petrol, diesel, and liquor. Now, in the non-tax revenue category, we've got money coming in from interest and dividends. The government earns interest on the loans it gives to states, union territories, foreign governments, and public sector companies. Now, dividends, on the other hand, are what the government gets from public sector companies and the RBI. Non-debt capital receipt includes things like the money the government makes from selling of parts of companies, assets, etc. For example, the government divesting LIC or Air India also comes under this category. Also, any cash coming back from loans given out in the past also falls into this category. Now, debt capital receipts is about borrowing money to cover the budget deficit, which is just a fancy term for when the government spends more than it takes in. The government grabs funds by issuing bonds, which is basically taking a loan to keep things running smoothly. Considering the government gets rupee in revenue, here is a breakup of how much of it comes from different sources. Now, both income and corporate tax contributes about 50 paise each, where GST contributes about 17, union excise duty at 7 paise, while customs forms about 4 paise in the overall pie. Now, more often than not, the government isn't able to generate the entire amount that it needs to finance its expenditure through taxes, and it resorts to market borrowings. Now, borrowings and other liability comprises about 34 paise in the overall pie, and non-debt capital receipts, which includes divestment, contributes about 2, while non-tax receipts stood at 6. Now, just like how you have different things to spend your money on like rent, groceries, and bills, the government has its own list of things to spend money on. This includes everyday expenses like paying salaries to government employees and big investments like building roads, schools, and hospitals. On the expenditure front, interest payments on past borrowings forms the biggest chunk, comprising 20 paise. This is followed by state's share of taxes and duties at 18 and central sector schemes at 17. Centrally sponsored schemes are at 9 paise of the overall government expenditure, while defense spending is at 8. Now, the government spends around 7 paise on various subsidies, while 8 is spent on other expenditure forms. Now, as we discussed, more often than not, the government ends up spending more than it earns, and the difference between how much the government is spending and how much it's bringing in, usually in a year, is called the fiscal deficit. Now, fiscal deficit is a very important metric in the world of budget, as it quantifies how much money a government is spending compared to what it's earning over that particular time frame. Now, bringing down this fiscal deficit is very crucial. Let's understand why. When the government spends more money than it earns, it has to borrow this money from the market to cover the gap. Now, the issue is right now the government's borrowing is a lot, and around a fifth of all of its spending is just going into paying off the interest on that borrowed money. Now, this is not a great situation. After the whole pandemic hit, the fiscal deficit went up to over 9%. But since then, the government has been working to bring down in a systematic way to 6.8%, 6.4% in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23 respectively. Now, looking ahead, it seems like the government is also on course to meet its fiscal deficit target for the current year at 5.9%. Now, the success is mainly because of strong growth in tax revenues and keeping a tight leash on regular spending, while still keeping up the spending on important things like infrastructure in fiscal year 24. Now, the upcoming budget is set to aim for a 5.3% fiscal deficit, and there are plans to further bring it down to 4.5% of the GDP by fiscal year 26. But it's crucial to remember that this higher target of 4.5% was set because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the original plan, as laid out by the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act of 2003, was to keep the fiscal deficit at 3%, and now that has become the long-term goal. Now moving on to pre-budget expectations. As we mentioned before, this will be an interim budget and we cannot expect any big bang reforms. Nevertheless, the significance of this budget should not be understated as it provides an opportunity for the government to talk about its economic accomplishments and announce some measures in the lead up to the 2024 general elections. So what can we expect? Now, the economic strategy adopted by the current government is a significant emphasis on investment-led growth, particularly through the implementation of large-scale infrastructure projects across various sectors like railways, roads, and defense. Now, as evident in recent budget estimates, the government has substantially increased its allocation for capital expenditure. For instance, the capex budget was raised to rupees 10 lakh crore for the fiscal year 24, up from 7.28 lakh crore in fiscal year 23 and rupees 5.92 lakh crore in fiscal year 22. Now, the rationale behind this approach is that investments in infrastructure has a multiplier effect on the economy. Additionally, it tends to attract private investments, further stimulating economic growth. Now, this trend is expected to persist in the upcoming year, although possibly at a slower pace compared to previous years. This trend is expected to persist in the upcoming year, although possibly at a slower pace compared to previous years. Now, ICRA, a credit rating agency, anticipates a modest rise in capex to about 10.2 trillion rupees in fiscal year 25. However, there is a recognition that a slow pace of capex could potentially impact GDP growth. On the other hand, setting a higher capex target also poses challenges in achieving the medium-term fiscal deficit target of 4.5%. So the government needs to strike a balance here. Taxpayers are also eagerly anticipating some income tax relief, especially for those sticking to the old tax regime, which is favored by a significant number of salaried individuals due to the benefits derived from deductions. As of now, the Income Tax Act 1961 maintains a basic exemption limit of rupees 2,50,000, a figure that has remained unchanged for several years now. Now, considering the current annual inflation rate of about 5%, the increased cost of living, and the considerable time that has passed since the last revision, there is an expectation that the basic exemption limit will be increased. Now, one of the widely utilized reductions is under Section 80C of the IT Act, which allows for investment-linked deductions. Now, this section covers investments such as Provident Fund, equity-linked savings schemes, life insurance premiums, housing loan prepayments, and a 5-year bank deposits, among others. Now, the existing threshold limit of rupees 1,50,000 under Section 80C has not been revised since the budget of 2014. Now, considering the inflationary trends over the years, there is a strong case for increasing this threshold limit too. Now, India's economy growth has indeed been remarkable, positioning it among the fastest growing economies globally. Notably, nearly half of this economic output comes from rural India, as highlighted in the Nifty report of 2017. However, despite these economic strides, rural India grapples with significant disparities due to high levels of poverty and socioeconomic inequalities. Now, just so you know, the Economic Survey of 2023 indicates that approximately 65% of the country's population still resides in rural areas, which shows the critical role rural India plays in contributing to the overall GDP. Now, it is widely known that the rural recovery has not been strong and the agricultural sector has been weak in the past few quarters. Now, the challenges faced by rural India are further compounded by unpredictable weather patterns and the resultant severe damages to agriculture fields, affecting the entire agriculture sector nationwide. Now, in this context, any measure aimed at addressing the concerns of the farming community are eagerly anticipated. This may include the expansion of existing schemes like the PM Kisan scheme or increased benefit through insurance schemes. Additionally, higher allocation for the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act could also be considered. Now, taking a closer look at the various priorities we've discussed, it becomes evident that the government is faced with a formidable challenge each year when it comes to presenting the union budget. On one hand, there is a compelling need for fiscal prudence. This entails the responsibility of managing the government's finances in a responsible manner. On the other hand, there exists an equally pressing need for pro-growth initiatives. The implementation of measures designed to boost the economy and generate employment is paramount, especially given the context of an impending election year. The government must actively pursue initiatives that foster economic growth and job creation. So the real challenge lies in striking the delicate balance between these two seemingly opposing needs, fostering economic growth and maintaining fiscal discipline. So what do you expect from this interim budget? Do let us know in the comment section. Having said that, this is me, Merlizana, signing off. Take care.
Did you like watching this video? Then download our app, Informed Investor, to watch more such informative and interesting videos.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.